Welcome to this edition of Startup Spotlight. I'm Craig Fryer at Fundify, here based in Austin, Texas, and we're delighted to have you joining us today. We're going to give you a closer look at a company called Undesert, and they're building this really interesting, scalable business that aims to tackle climate change in a very unique way. So their team includes experienced entrepreneurs, scientists, and investors who believe in helping the environment. And so joining me today is my colleague, our Director of Marcom and PR, Amy Thompson. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Craig.
She leads our marketing efforts, and so really appreciated you being here today and helping put this together. And from Undesert, we're joined by the CEO, Nick Seat. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. And also Hill Kemp, their CTO. So let's dive right in. I'm going to share a screen here, and we'll get going on some information that I think you're going to find very interesting. So we're featuring Undesert and their team. One thing to note as a disclaimer, nothing in this educational live stream is to be considered as an offer to sell or a solicitation of any offer to buy any security to any person in any such jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation or sell is unlawful. So just letting you know that this is informational only and an educational live stream. So as we get underway, Nick, if you could tell us what Undesert does and a little about the team and the genesis of the idea and the problem that you aim to solve in the industry.
Absolutely. So Undesert is trying to solve climate change. And I mean, that sounds ridiculous. It sounds crazy. But when I first looked at this problem, because I have children, I have 4 kids, and I'm thinking, I really want to do something for them to leave the world in a better place than I found it. And so I'm watching the news every day, and it's just worse and worse. These horrible wildfires, these terrible things that I never thought would happen in my lifetime just keep happening. And that really got me thinking, there has to be a way to solve this problem. And of course, I live in Los Alamos, New Mexico, which is home to the world famous Los Alamos National Lab. And I said, I'm going to go and ask these top scientists to help me with my climate change problem. And they came to me and said, the problem is there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere. And the problem with that is that the CO2 collects, it acts like a blanket, which traps the heat, dries up the world beneath it, which is the result is what we see today, which is that a spark in a off the freeway near a stand of trees will turn into a uncontrolled fire. And then, so I took that a step further and I said, well, what can we do to solve this problem? And it turns out CO2 is a very challenging molecule. You can't split it into its carbon and oxygen. You can't do anything with it. And so that got me thinking, there must be a magic solution out there. And I did a year of research until I ended up at this place called the Brackish Groundwater Research Facility, or Bergendorf, in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And at that location, they had a whole bunch of different exhibits which were turning dirty water into clean water. And the person who was running the facility said, only one of these research projects works. And it's this gentleman who is the CTO of the company called Hill Kemp. And Hill's technology is a great technology that actually works and turns dirty or salty water into clean water. And then I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing. But how does that turn into save the world, which was my mission? And the solution to that, and that is this Undesert that you see before you, is to plant pine trees. Lots of giant, beautiful pine trees in the desert where there is currently no pine trees. There's no water. Actually, there's nothing there. In fact, this is the kind of land that you drive by on the I-25 and you see it on either side. There's just a billboard. Maybe there's a few shrubs on the ground. Maybe there's some very hungry looking cattle. There's really not much there. If we can turn just 2% of the world's deserts into pine forests, then we have not just solved the amount of CO2s that humans are emitting every single day, but we are actually able to absorb that backlog of CO2 that's already been emitted, that debt of CO2 that's already in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. It will solve climate change.
That's fascinating, Nick. What an amazing mission. Just love the way this has come together for you all. You all caught the attention of MassChallenge, one of the top accelerators in the whole world. I would love to hear a little bit more about that. I know you all were selected as part of their 2021 cohort, so congratulations. I would love to hear a little bit about what you learned during the process and how going through that cohort better equipped you all for growth.
It was a great experience, and I highly recommend the Accelerator experience for all of the aspiring entrepreneurs who are in the audience. I think it's a great way to provide a little bit of structure to your crazy idea, right? And to help you formalize your business. Certainly, when we entered the MassChallenge cohort, we were going to use Hill's amazing water technology to do something different, still helpful for the environment, but different from growing trees. We were going to use it to cool down solar panels, because we know solar panels will be more and plentiful and a growing market. So we thought, why don't we squeeze more juice out of them? How do we make your solar panels more efficient? And this is the company that we presented there, called Undesert.com. And the Accelerator partnered us with key industry leaders. And that was to help us to get feedback from the industry. One of our those industry leaders happened to be a advisor to the head of the Department of Energy, or one of the top people at the Department of Energy. So he connected us with that head of the Department of Energy, and that person said, no way are we ever going to use your technology, because, and this is something that would have taken us years of research to really understand, he said, because solar panels and water don't mix. It was kind of an obvious one, but he said, of all the millions of solar panels I've put up around the US, we don't want anything to do with water. So that, in our first month at MassChallenge, was the first and most dramatic pivot for our company, where we said, enough with helping to cool down solar panels. We're gonna just stick to something that has been done for generations, millennia, growing trees. And what can we do that's special that nobody else can do? We're gonna grow these trees where there is nothing today. That is to say, the deserts, the desert shrubland. And I happen to live in New Mexico, like I said, and New Mexico is covered with dry and unused land in the form of desert shrubland. So we're going to start here. We've planted our first 16 trees in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Doesn't sound like much, but these are trees that we dug into this it's like concrete. The land is so dry. We had to use a tractor-mounted auger to drill holes, and then we put the trees into that. And with our proprietary watering system, these trees are growing. They're very happy. They're healthy. And the nice thing about happy, healthy trees is that they are immune to things like brush fire, wildfire, and insects. So that's the thing we also learned, is that the reason these out-of-control wildfires keep happening is because we are not taking care of our forests. We're letting the branches fall, we're letting them dehydrate. Basically, it's the difference between lighting a campfire with wet wood, which is very, very difficult, and lighting it with dry tinder. Dry tinder, of course, pretty much spontaneously combusts. And that's what's been going on with all the forests, at least in North America.
Fascinating, and congratulations on getting that pilot off the ground. And as we know, we're partners with MassChallenge, and they look at thousands of companies every year. But the number of ideas out there are extraordinary. And in my experience as an entrepreneur and as an investor, success often comes down, as I've observed it, to the team and how well the team executes on the idea better than anyone else in the industry. Because oftentimes the technology and the problems coalesce around a time where it makes sense to move forward. So tell me about the team you've built and briefly describe your background and also Hill's background as well, please.
I'm happy to talk about myself. I'll pass it over to Hill so he can talk about his background. But my background came at this from the engineering background. I did a double major engineering and economics at Harvey Mudd College, and then I did my MBA at UCLA. And after I graduated from the MBA, I started my technology company, and I built that from 0 to 50 people before I sold it to Adobe Corporation in 2011. So I was something of an entrepreneurial success story. And so I'm looking for a new way to engage my entrepreneurial training. Of course, I had lots of babies. That was one way. It's a very entrepreneurial endeavor to raise children. And but certainly now that I feel like I have a mission to save the planet, that it is something that it is truly engaging. And that's something all entrepreneurs should have, is the passion to pull you through those hard times. And that's an important lesson, is that unless you have that passion for your idea, whether that be whatever, or self-driving cars or whatever, then why do it? If it's not your reason for getting up in the morning, right, apart from your family, then why do it? And so I was fortunate enough to find the brains behind the technology. Hill can introduce himself. He has the rights to the technology, the patents, and of course it was demonstrated and working in the United Arab Emirates when I bumped into Hill at the Alamogordo water facility. Hill?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And my background's chemical engineering. I've worked with 50 or so chemical refining and petrochemical processes. I started work about 12 years ago to overhaul the classic solar still, and I basically re-engineered it and raised its productivity up from 25% efficiency to, actually with a 2-cycle system, we're now at 125% efficient on the solar energy. We sold this first installation to a company called Merlin Farms out in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. They've been operating for the last 3 years using our solar desalination panels to grow food in the hydroponics system, and they're producing record food production, and they're feeding seawater and desert sun. That's all they're using, and our technology bridges between those two to make the food production possible. I own patents, U.S. patents, international patents, and Undesert has exclusive worldwide access to that IP, and that's what we're using to drive Undesert.
So it may be, this is really interesting. It may be apparent to some people what you're trying to do in terms of the disruptive nature of this, but talk a little bit more about the market and the spaces or sectors that you aim to disrupt here, and why this is an ideal time to build and launch this company.
Well, growing trees by the millions in raw desert where nothing is growing now is going to disrupt 2 key features. One is the key markets. The $200 billion lumber market is going to get disrupted, and the similarly sized $200 billion carbon credit market is going to get disrupted. And Craig, look, as Nick mentioned, the headlines are full of all the global warming impacts: fires out of control, severe storms, disruptions of all kinds from the weather, and it's a direct result of global warming. We feel like we're entering the market just at the perfect time to address these problems, and we work fast.
I'd like to know a little bit about who you all see as your competition as a company. Who's out there that you're looking to outperform in the market?
Well, yes. Amy, as you might guess, all those headlines have brought out thousands of people with thousands of different ideas, and there are a lot of them under development right now. Undesert is one of the few out of all of those thousands. We're looking at operating at the billions of tons of carbon dioxide per year. And that's the scale the globe needs, is billions of tons. Now, there are a few, I think, biomass companies that think with new technology, they might be able to get to the billion tons per year level, and using emerging technology. But Undesert is unique. We bridge between two experienced and proven technologies with proven track records. Desalination, and we have our own innovation using solar powered desalination with zero liquid waste for brine. And the other one is, of course, plantation forestry. That's been going on for centuries. People have been growing trees like that. And the key thing about ours is we put those two technologies together and we create a completely new market entry. We don't compete for land with any other uses, and we don't compete for water with any other uses. The salt water we use, and eventually ocean water if we have to. We're not competing with any other uses for that water or land.
So, Nick, Hill talked about the patents, which provide you advantage. I'd like to know a little bit more about how many patents have been awarded and that are assigned to you for the worldwide rights, and how does this provide that distinct competitive advantage for Undesert?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two utility patents that are fully issued. A lot of people like to claim patent pending and so forth, but we have issued two full issued by the USPTO patents, and then we have extended those for worldwide rights as well. So in actual fact, we have 4 patents, 2 domestic and 2 international. Plus, we've been always adding more IP to the collection as we go. So we have a couple more pending. So that's something that aspiring entrepreneurs always need to keep the IP in the back pocket, because once you are in the position to scale and grow, there will be a lot of competition chasing your tail, and IP does provide that distinguishing factor. I think a lot of investors ask that question as well.
Yeah, it's a key differentiator. And as you were saying, oftentimes within a technology, you create a picket fence of patents that continue to build upon your primary base patents. So
right.
Speaking of following up on something else that Hill said with regards to the United Arab Emirates and the pilot there, talk about, Nick, if you would, customer traction so far. I know you've got the pilot going, but what other customers are taking a look, or are you planning on additional forests and pilots in the coming timeframe?
That's right. So we're actually in another accelerator now. So once we finished MassChallenge, we decided we would join another accelerator in order to prep ourselves to compete in the Elon Musk SpaceX EarthX challenge, which is a $100 million prize for the winning company. But then, they're offering several $1 million milestone prizes. So we're very focused on that competition now, and it is closing in February 1. And so we'll get our application in and we'll see how we do. And in the process of being in this accelerator called Avatar Innovations, they partnered us with an oil and gas company, because oil and gas companies are the largest emitters of CO2, and also the most beholden to their shareholders to clean up their act. So it's not like they're the great enemy, the great green goblin in the room. They are actually thinking, we have to solve this problem because our shareholders are demanding it. Shareholders are just normal people like you and me. And they're saying, listen, I don't want to be a shareholder in a company that is wrecking the planets. So you guys need to clean up your act and figure out how to deal with this, which is what the EarthX challenge is about, and something that we are benefiting because we're able to get feedback from a customer, potential customer, to refine our technology in that respect.
Well, that's very exciting, Nick, and we wish you well in that endeavor. And so you're speaking of things that are very extremely futuristic. So let's time travel a little bit, okay? So let's imagine ourselves 5 years down the road. You've gotten the funding that you needed from crowdfunding, from other sources, and you've been able to hit your milestones and achieve the objectives that you set, building out different IP and so forth. What does life look like for Undesert, and how have you impacted the world at that point, 5 years hence? And again, this is completely speculative, but let's imagine out loud.
I like speculative. So the fact of the matter is we can be in the ground covering hectares of land with pine forests in a matter of years, right? So 1 or 2 years, we would be able to cover a hectare of land with pine forest. Immediately, as soon as these trees are in the ground, they're sucking CO2 out of the air. If we were to continue that pace of growth and also get government actors involved in foresting their deserts, then we can actually talk about solving this climate change problem within a decade or so. So it's something that it's very little technology, speculation. All of the technology is proven and can scale. The actual challenge of putting trees into the desert ground, it's not that complicated, right? It's just something that just needs to be done. And so there's very little speculative science that needs to go on. It's just a matter of just getting out there and doing it. And for us, that means getting out there, raising money, winning the X Prize, and performing well for our Accelerator partners.
Well, and I have to ask this follow-on question. If there were, I mean, since you're going after the Elon Prize, and since we know his plans in 10 years, are there low oxygen plant species that might be able to thrive off-world in other environments if sufficient resources? I know they're finding ice, they're finding water, they're finding interesting minerals. So Mars comes to mind immediately. And again, I'm just wanting to understand from my own curiosity, what are the possibilities for off-world types of environments?
It's not that much of a stretch. In fact, what we're doing is, in fact, terraforming planet Earth, right? This is growing things in a location where there previously used to be nothing, or maybe eons ago, there used to be forests everywhere, but certainly there aren't any right now in our desert. That means that we could contemplate expanding our desert region to be extraterrestrial locations. So
that's the so-called Planet B plan. But the technology is there, and I believe there's actually frozen water on the poles of the moon that we could exploit. And of course, the solar power is a lot better because the moon has no atmosphere. So we've done a little bit of thinking that way, but we're focused on the X Prize and getting the Earth turned around.
That's right. But a little more closer to home, once you have these desert forests, now suddenly you could actually use that lumber to build housing within that desert location. And once you have a hectare or so of forest growing, now we're actually changing the local weather. Now we're doing what's called the albedo effect. We're seeding clouds. We're allowing natural respiration from the tree to the atmosphere and back to take place. So now your desert is actually a habitable region. And that's something that we see as a great outcome, is that as you know, they run out of places to move to migrate to, as the human migration continues. Now we're opening up more territory on the planet for those human migrants.
Yeah, and over time, that our planting and the roots and so forth from our trees will actually transform that desert soil and turn it to fertile, moisture-retaining soil from its current, basically concrete status.
We're saying you don't have to always grow pine trees. Why not grow fruit trees?
Sure.
or what have you.
Well, exactly. Well, let me say on behalf of Amy and I, thank you for joining us today for this edition of Startup Spotlight. I know that both of us have learned a great deal. And for those who are watching, if you want to learn more about Undesert and what they're doing in terms of their crowdfunding campaign, you could go to this site, this address on our website. You can also scan this QR code and it will take you right there. If you have specific questions that you would like to ask Nick and Hill, you can do so under the discussion board and hear directly back from them. And then you can also watch the update tab for additional information about the campaign and company news. So we're really grateful for you joining us today. Once again, this disclaimer that this is an educational live stream that's not intended to sell or offer any security, especially in any jurisdiction where it is unlawful. So on behalf of Amy, myself, and the team at Fundify, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at future Startup Spotlights. Thanks very much.